PGA Nation, we are back, and we've missed you. We've missed you last week. We took the week off. There was an election. Spencer won the week before, and I think Spencer said something about wanting to hold an election tonight for the draft order, something along those lines. We'll get into it. Spence, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, and we can talk about this as we get further into the show, but in my opinion, and we may have differing thoughts on this, tournaments like this can sometimes be complicated. Like, for all the obvious reasons, it's an extremely weak field. I actually thought, for the most part, that either sportsbooks, DFS sites got pricing relatively correct. So, the top of the board for me, there are some minor spots where I would rather push the chips in one way or the other if we're talking about the top 4 or 5 guys on the board. But I don't know, for me, and we can discuss it as the show goes further, I kind of think the big 5 on this board are the big 5 of where we should be moving. So I don't really have much of a lean. So normally I give myself the first pick. I could kind of go either way on any of the picks. So we might have a bit of a vote here to see, give me a little bit of information. I can be generous and give you guys a better pick, and then we can go from there.
Well, you've referenced your big 5. If you get the 4th pick, that would ensure you get 2 of your 5. So it sounds like that's probably where you want to be. I guess to be determined. David, how you doing today?
I am very well, mate. Good to be back in New Zealand after traversing the world. Short work trip in Penang, and then a trip to Melbourne for the Melbourne Cup, which is basically outside of the Kentucky Derby, for the rest of the world regarded as one of the biggest, if not the biggest, horse race on the planet. So we had an awesome time. Excited to see what happens with this draft election. There'll be some debate on how the USA performed from the rest of us in the world in this recent election anyway, so I don't have a lot of confidence for the polling ability. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, no, looking forward to being back on the show. And yeah, missed everyone last week, obviously, and it was another great tournament for us over at DeepDiveGolf. We had 2 times 2 second place finishes on both the PGA Tour and the DP Tour from our selections. So always sniffing around the top of the leaderboard and cashing a few winners.
All right. Well, we got another big week ahead of us. We're in Bermuda this week. It's an extremely short course, but it's a fun one, and it's like a similar. We've been getting watered down fields a lot this year, but for this tournament, that is not unique. It's always a bit of a weaker tournament, which actually in all realness tends to be the norm this year. So I'm excited to break it down. Spence, the best course breakdown in the industry. Tell me what you're looking for on the course in Bermuda.
I will keep this relatively short, Joel. I know you have played this course before. I want to give you at least a couple of seconds to talk about it. I'll let David discuss the weather. He always does that in such a high-end fashion with it, and that's going to be a talking point this week, and that's something that we can dive deeper into. But as far as this course is concerned, you kind of mentioned it, Joel. It's one of the shortest courses that you're going to get on the PGA Tour. It's only behind Pebble Beach. You have 10 of the 11 par 4s that are under 450 yards. That 11th one is just over at 458 yards. So you do repeatedly get this ask from a very similar range. When I ran numbers and I tried to figure out what do you need to do to find success here, the high-end performers are typically the ones that excel from those par 4 distances. That's how you end up winning this tournament. More of making the cut is taking advantage of the par 5s, and then the hidden distance comes in play on the par 3s. If you're looking at just the par 5 percentages here, you have 40.1 to 55.8% birdie or better percentage through those 3 holes. 2 of the 3 are going to produce an eagle percentage of over 4%. So all of that further emphasizes this answer of a course that it's going to be easy at its core, but you do have this sticky, rough, slow Bermuda, and then that propensity for win that we keep talking about. So I'll let you talk about it, Joel. I would assume based off of that answer, and I know we talked off air a little bit just to tee you up here, there are short holes, and they were even shorter when you played them, you were telling us, but tell us a little bit about it from your experience.
Yeah, I played this course a few times. One, it's beautiful. So if you get a chance to watch it, it's just fun to look at because you're right on the water. There's a lot of, undulation on the course, some hilly holes that are just a bit unique. So it's fun to watch. I stink at golf, so I'm not any good. It was short for me, who is not a good golfer. Now, I know they lengthen the course for the pros, but I remember even thinking when I was playing, it's like, how much can they possibly lengthen it? Like, this thing really needs a lot of length. So this is what it is. It's a shorter course. It is not all that difficult. I didn't score well because I stink, but for a professional, they're going to score very well. It is not, the putting is, I remember I made a few putts. It's relatively flat. It should be the most challenging on the putting greens. But you'll notice like there's a par 4 that's like, I don't remember exactly. I think it's just maybe a little bit over 300, but it's straight uphill. So it's like you're literally going up a very steep hill, which makes it very unique. And they do things like that to kind of make up for their lack of distance. But if you're hitting the ball well this week, I think the biggest factor is going to be weather and wind because it's right on the water. And it almost resembles in a way Pebble Beach, not quite as extreme, but you're on cliffs right over the ocean. When that wind picks up, that's going to be a factor, and that's where these guys are going to have to make up for it. But other than that, I would tell you, I would look for guys who are playing good form and not necessarily prioritizing distance because distance is not going to be an issue. Anybody, any professional golfer is going to be able to get there. I'm almost going to over prioritize short game because of that, because it's going to neutralize the distance because it's not really going to matter. These holes aren't very long. But David, I'd love to hear from you. If you see any weather edge this week based on Thursday's tee times and how you're seeing the week break down.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know that a lot of people will be excited for the weather forecast. Albert, as I indicated earlier, I've already got the whiteboard ready to draw my like storm clouds and different wave fronts coming through. But yeah, look, after Las Vegas, where we obviously called both the delays in play and the most significant weather edge of the entire season, we managed to hit Taylor Pendrith's first round leader at 40-1 and JT Poston for the outright winner at 35-1 in the same week, based off weather forecasting. So again, just a reminder to everyone that you've got 50% off our Win Daily memberships is down in the description. Weather can change quickly, especially in an island like Bermuda, stuck in the middle of, like actually smack bang in the middle of the Atlantic. It can change quickly. So make sure that you're plugged into the Discord, because that can really make a huge difference, not just in terms of your bets, but also in terms of your DFS lineups and whether you want to be building those weather stacks and making sure that you're getting through the cut line. It was something outrageous in Vegas where it was like 20 players from the wrong draw managed to make the cut, and that was it. So it just absolutely decimated people who got the wrong side of it or just didn't pay attention to the weather, which always baffles me because golf, believe it or not, is played outside in the weather. Like, so, check the weather forecast. What I'm seeing at the moment and this current day, again, we'll have updates in the Win Daily Discord. It does look to me like it's going to be Thursday PM, Friday AM. It looks to be dying down Thursday afternoon. It looks a bit picking up again Friday afternoon. So that rotation looks to get the best of it. What I would also say is it's kind of reliant a little bit on whether we get delays. I know this is an extremely exposed golf course. There's very little cover from the wind. You're literally perched on a cliff face with winds howling in from off the ocean. And if they can't keep the ball stationary on the greens, you will see delays in play. I think the gusts at the moment, if they tend out to be as they are forecast, that they will have to delay play. Again, that's just more credence to that Thursday PM, Friday AM group getting the best of it as well. So I'm not as confident this week in the weather forecast as I was in Vegas. In Vegas, it was just like a home run. It was like so obvious that this was what was going to happen. And I was kind of yelling it from the rooftops for everybody to get on board. But this one, I think there was a little bit more risk to it because you are kind of relying on a bit of the delay in play. But I don't think it'll be as significant as Vegas, but I do think it'll be that Thursday PM, Friday AM group that is going to get the best of the draw this week in Bermuda.
Boom. There you have it. There's definitely a weather edge, to keep an eye out. And don't forget, as always, make sure you follow Win Daily. Hit the like button if you can and subscribe. You'll easily make up the subscription price by following us for just a week or two. It will pay off your subscription. And this week especially, you get those weather edge as we get closer because things can change, right? We're seeing what we see right now But as Thursday approaches, there could be updates that could shift. We'll get into Discord. We'll post the weather updates as they come. You'll get Steven's ownership article as the week goes on, so you can understand what the ownership looks like. And of course, we'll post our outright bets. But for today, we have a draft. And Spencer, you're going to need to enlighten us because we still don't know what the draft order is going to be. So tell us, what are you thinking?
So let's do this a little bit differently today, with me not necessarily having a built-in route that I want to take. I think that we can have more of an open discussion at the very top of the board. So we will keep this simple. If you don't want to give an answer, unfortunately, you're going to be eliminated from contention of getting the number one pick. But who would be your number one pick? And based off of that pick, we will then have a discussion of what the order is. And there's two players that I have in
Are you just auctioning this off? Is that what you're doing?
we're having an open conversation here because I think one of the things, David, that when we look at this board, and maybe if you end up being correct about the weather edge that comes into play, that obviously pushes more in the direction of guys like Maverick McNeely, Mackenzie Hughes, any of those options. If it doesn't go in that direction, I tend to think the Ben Griffins, Doug Gims, all those guys have a lot of potential in the other edge. And as I said, like 5 players for me are inside of my top 6. They're my big 5 are the 5 guys on the board. So I think just as a different way to take this show this week, just who would be your 101? And we'll just go from there.
After you, Joe.
I'm in tie between 2. I'll say I'm going to start with, Seamus Power.
Okay.
Yeah, mine would be Mav McNeely or Mackenzie Hughes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And for me, I really don't see much of a difference between really any of the guys from Doug Gimmon up. For the sake of the show, since you guys so graciously played along, Joel, you can have Seamus at the 101.
Okay, I didn't commit to that. I would appreciate 101, but I might not take Seamus Power.
All right. Well, David,
you didn't say we had to.
David,
we didn't have to answer honestly.
Well, David, then if you would like to take McNeely, and I will give an answer about McNeely. If not, we'll move this show along. We don't need to have the whole time of it. But
yeah, I'll take McNeely in the number 1 spot. That's fine.
Okay, so I will put that in for David there with McNeely. One of the things with McNeely, if you're trying to figure out an answer for ownership here, and I think that this is a unique thing, is McNeely and Hughes specifically have about 5 or 6% less than a lot of these other guys in that range. So if David ends up being correct with the weather there, I think that's a very interesting viewpoint of what's going to happen over the next 24 hours, because right now you're actually getting leverage in that position. Joel, I guess we will give you the 103 and let you make a pick in a second. At the 102, for me, it was probably going to be either Maverick McNeely or Ben Griffin. I'm going to take Ben Griffin at the 102, and I understand that there's a lot of popularity with that pick that we're seeing right now. Here's the one thing with Ben Griffin that I at least want to pinpoint a little bit deeper into. So when we look at golfers and their form leading into a tournament, one of the things I'm always trying to find is how somebody's projected to putt and what does their ball striking look like entering the week. And Ben Griffin kind of has that prime profile that I'm always trying to get into, where if you look at the last 24 rounds, he's 80th in putting. If you look specifically on Bermuda greens, he jumps inside the top 25. I think there's a reason why there's a lot of popularity around him. I wish he wasn't trending in this 25% range, but with all 5 of those guys that we've discussed being 17% or higher, I will go with Ben Griffin at the 102, and we'll kick it over to you, Joel, at the 103.
As I like to do, I like to start a little controversy here. So I'm not going to take Seamus Power, of course. And I'm going to take Mackenzie Hughes at the 103. Who was the first 2 guys I was contemplating? And I thought that maybe would have been my edge of somehow getting like the pick or fooling someone, but it really didn't do anything. I was happy to get him no matter what I said. But no, the reality is exactly what I was saying to start the show, right? Mackenzie Hughes is the type of guy who like makes his living around the greens with his short game. If distance doesn't matter, right, this is a really good spot. Let alone the fact that Mackenzie Hughes currently is playing his best golf. And his ball striking in the last 2 tournaments that he's played in, he's gained almost 4 strokes at the Sanderson and almost 6 at the Pro Course. So if he's found any consistency gaining 3 or 4 strokes on approach, which is not his game, in addition to the fact that he's really strong around the greens and putting, this seems like a perfect fit for him in a watered down field. I think he can go out there and win this tournament. So I really like the fit for Mackenzie Hughes this week.
Yeah, number one player in my model when you add par 5 scoring and putting together. I think there's a lot to like about Mackenzie Hughes this week.
Exactly. A lot of upside, and we're seeing his best golf. So I have a lot of optimism for him. Audience, you got 2. It looks like there's at least 1 nomination in. So we'll need the nominations. As a reminder, in case anyone is new to watching the show, make sure you're logged in on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you can participate in the draft. You nominate a golfer by putting him in the chat, and then when the second person says that person's name, that is the audience's pick. You do need to stay within the DraftKings salary, so you'll be able to afford every golfer. Just make sure you're nominating guys that you'll be able to fit to within your lineup. So Doug Gim is in there right now. It looks like a few more nominations are coming in. As we wait for those to get finalized, David, would love to get your take. Are you interested in Ben Griffin or Mackenzie Hughes this week?
Are you kidding? Are you interested in Mackenzie Hughes? I didn't know that we were back on. I didn't know that we were back on talking terms yet, Joel. I love how Joel the last kind of, I want to say 3 months, but maybe it's 6 months, has like fully leaned into the role of villain on the show and just really embraced that persona. And he's like, this is, Joel's a very nice guy. Let me just put that out there. We chat off the show, and he's a lovely, lovely gentleman. But on the show, he has fully adopted the role of the antagonizer, the villain, the instigator of the drama. And I'm here for it, even though I would have loved to have taken Mackenzie Hughes. I think, as you said at the top of the show, with the weather, even more, like this is already a golf course where you can reach everything in terms of the par 5s. Distance is not a factor, accuracy probably more so. But as a result of that, you've always seen that around the green and putting has been a way to separate yourself. But even more so this week, because it is going to be windy, you're going to miss more greens. Things happen when wind gusts hit golf balls, and you just aren't going to be able to hit every single green. You're going to see a higher missed green in regulation percentage as a result, and your ability to scramble and your ability to putt is really going to be even further emphasized in those conditions. So I love both the selections. As I said at the top, I think that Ben Griffin's probably on the wrong side of the draw, but otherwise he would have certainly been within the frame of my player pool. And same with Mackenzie Hughes, obviously, who does get the right side of the draw, and that would have been my preferred starting route, is going McNeely and Hughes, as Joel is well aware.
There you have it. All right. Audience locks in Daniel Berger and Novak, which is just a very much so me type of round, right? Both guys I am normally drafting. So the audience taking a page out of my book. I love it. I love the start. You get 2 guys under 9K, so you've got plenty of money left to fill out the roster. I think both guys have upside to win this week. I think both of those guys are, because it's a pretty weak field, I think both of those guys are pretty much as good as anyone in the field. So taking a different approach, like maybe fading the top of the board and building a more balanced lineup with guys like that, I think makes a lot of sense. So I love the start to the audience draft here. Spence, I'd love to get your take.
I kind of think that Andrew Novak this week is very similar to what we've gotten from Maverick McNeely over the last handful of tournaments, to where public perception was a little bit lower on McNeely. We've seen McNeely throw the results together. Now all of a sudden he's pushed himself up the board. Novak is going to be 10 to 12%, and some of the upside totals in my model have him inside the top 5. So I think Novak is going to be very sneaky for DFS. And unfortunately, that was one of the critical parts of my team that I wanted to get this week. He was one of those names where I guess you were correct, Joel, probably putting myself in that 4th spot would have been more ideal to try to get Novak and figure this out. But I really like the Novak pick from the audience.
Great work there by the audience. All right. I can't allow Seamus Power to go on beyond here. So obviously I would be taking Seamus Power as well. I was not planning to start my draft Hughes Power. That is spending a lot of stars. This is really the opinion of stars, which is really the opposite of my strategy this week. But with Berger and Novak off the board, and Hughes and Power there. It just makes sense from my start. I'll have to figure out how to find value as we go. But there, I don't need to say much about Seamus Power. In this field, he's one of the better players. He's playing great golf. His form is in really good shape. He's even had some good amount of success here at this tournament where he won it last year. He's got a top 12 in 2022. So there's really nothing wrong with Seamus Power, except unless you maybe put him on the wrong side of the win draw. But as long as he can make the cut, I think you can get a really good showing from Power over 4 days. Spence, you got your second pick here. Where are you going from here?
I guess it's a game theory answer from this point because I kind of agree with you, Joel. Like the way that this lineup has the potential to start forming for me is not exactly the route that I plan to go. I guess I will let maybe hopefully David make this a little bit easier for me with his picks. So I'm going to go with a golfer that had high upside numbers in my model in wind. You're also, if you're looking for somebody who's in form right now, 22 consecutive rounds of shooting par or better, which is a tournament leading total. I'm going to take Sam Stevens at 9,200.
Sam Stevens. All right. What does the ownership number look like for him?
It's climbing a little bit. I see it at 15% right now, which is the 13th highest owned player. If you want to put that in direct comparison with all the $9,000 golfers and above, the only two players that would be less than that would be Andrew Putnam and Patrick Rogers in my sheet. So I think technically compared to the ownership there, you're getting a slight rebate from some of those other names.
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. David, you got McNeely. You got two more here. Would love your take on the last few picks. And then where are you going from here?
Yeah, look, Seamus Power thinks a no-brainer. He seems a pretty safe way to start the lineup. Obviously, he's defending champion. Doesn't need to play at this tournament by any means. So the fact that he's traveled out here in order to play it perhaps is something. Sam Stevens and Andrew Novak, I'd probably prefer Stevens over Novak personally. I think that obviously his short game is a real asset for Stevens. And obviously the links to Texas as well with Sam Stevens, another very, very windy destination, can prove his mettle in the higher gusty winds. Again, they're both on the morning side of the draw, so if it does end up flipping that Thursday PM, Friday AM, they could both be quite convenient spots to look to find some leverage and find some pivot points off guys like Stevens and Novak, who I think are strong selections if they're on the right side of the weather wave. So in terms of my picks, obviously I'm going to have to rebuild a slightly different route here than I would have. So first I'm going to go and take some chalk, but the reason why he's chalky is because he's very, very clearly undervalued, and that's Wesley Bryan. Sixth last start in Mexico. He's had good record in other tropical courses, finished second earlier this year at Punta Cana. He had a 6 in Puerto Rico previously as well. He's only played this 3 times for a 37th as his best finish, but in saying that, he's never really been in the same sort of form that he arrives here in. He's been playing a lot better, and he's really fighting for that PGA Tour card. Been 128th. He is extremely highly owned, so you need to be careful how you deploy him. But looking just purely at the translation from odds to the DraftKings salary, he's priced at the moment at like 66 to 1. He opened at about 75s and 80s, and that's been bet down since then. So he's priced kind of the same price as someone like Rhea Hasatsune, who's 90 to 1. So there is a clear disparity between the way that bookmakers in Vegas are rating Wesley Bryan's chances versus the way that DraftKings originally priced him up. And again, he gets the good weather wave as well. So he is chalky, but there's good reason for it. Just be cautious how you decide to deploy him would be my advice. Then from there, I am going to go and take Matty Schmid. I think that we can forgive his last start in Mexico a little bit. It was very tough on that first day. Didn't necessarily look like his best game was on full display. 90th in the FedEx Cup rankings. He doesn't necessarily actually have to be playing this week. He's pretty much home and hosed in terms of keeping his PGA Tour card. I think the reason that he's playing is because he's obviously found success at this golf course before, namely last year. He finished finished third at this golf tournament. He's also had a 10th in Puerto Rico and an 11th at the Corrales Punta Cana. So really good form in terms of those tropical destinations as well. He's a very, very good putter of the golf ball. I like that aspect. I'm weighting putting it around the green very highly, but he also brings the approach play, and he's long and straight off the tee. So he does have that all-round game. I think in this kind of class of field, I feel that Matty Schmid has the potential to go out there and perhaps even secure a first PGA Tour victory.
Solid round there. I like both picks. I think it's a really solid start to your draft there. Spencer, I'd love your take on Brian Schmid, and then you're up for your third.
Yeah, I mean, Schmid has been extremely safe over the last handful of tournaments if you ignored the miscut that he put together. He was a golfer that has been consistently climbing in my model. He's top 10 almost every single week. Like, this is obviously fair price of what we're getting, and probably a little bit of value there because of that miscut at 9,100. I'm going to do a similar thing as David when he took Wesley Bryan of just, this is going to be, I guess, like the leverage pivot route from the Wesley Bryan answer, but I'm going to try to get a name here that is a little bit cheaper to open things back up for myself and kind of let the board come to me. So I'm going to take KH Lee at 7,400. KH Lee's super intriguing in my model because he's sub 5% right now. If you look at the recent strokes gained total and the way that I weighted it in my model, he's inside of the top 10 over his last 24 rounds. And I don't think people necessarily realize that form when they look at some of the results that we've gotten. It's been a little bit boom or bust with it. The win play leaves a lot to be desired. He's outside of the top 70 for me in that area. So that's an area of the game where things could go wrong. But this is a short course type of golfer who has shown upside at similar courses in the past. And one of the things that I really highlighted here at the beginning when I gave my quick course breakdown is I wanted to find par 4 scorers that could find high-end success. Guys that were going to be top 10 projected scorers on those par 4s and actually compete for a title if they put it together. KH Lee, along with there's I guess 4 names that would be in the top 20 that are going to be outside of 50-1. KH Lee is one of those names that checks the boxes there. 6th for me in that category. Going to shoot for the upside in that area and take KH Lee at 7,400.
Boom. KH Lee locked it in. We've seen the upside from KH Lee at 7,400. The price is right. So I think it's a nice start to your build there. A lot of the value coming up the board early here. So, I think it's going to be interesting how we close these out because I'm already starting to run thin. But I'm going to start here. I'm going to take David Lipsky. Lipsky, I think, is playing good golf. He's affordable. The price is right down here at 70. Where is he? 7,300. He's doing everything well. In the one area where David Lipsky hurts you is off the tee, which I think will be neutralized here on this course. So if I feel like I don't have to worry as much about his off the tee woes, we know he can go high. He can go nuclear with his irons. He's been really solid around the green. It's a mixed bag with the putter, but he can find a hot putter. I think it's easier greens to putt on. So I think he can putt well here. I think there's plenty of upside with a $7,300 Lipsky. Audience, you got 2 here, so we need that. It looks like a few nominations are in. We're going to need those doubled to lock in those picks. While we wait for those to get locked in, Spencer, I'd love to go back to you here. Are you interested in David Lipsky this week?
I'm indifferent. I'll kick it over to David. He might have a better take than I do. I mean, to me, he's a name that's kind of fairly priced. There's other options at 7,300 that I would rather take, but I'll let David answer that question.
We've had a bit of success with David Lipsky before. Obviously a former DP World Tour player, so I've been following his career for many, many years now, before he made his way over to the PGA Tour and qualified there. And one place that we had particular success from actually was in Hawaii at the Sony Open. So again, a more of a driving accuracy golf course, one where it is exposed to the wind, it's coastal, tropical vibes as well, obviously in Hawaii compared to Bermuda. So you've got that going for you. The other thing I'd say with Lipsky as well is that in terms of his recent putting performances or lack thereof, because he is a dreadful putter most of the time, where he's spiked has tended to be on Bermuda grass, including recently when he finished second, I believe, at the Pro Tour. So he's tended to find a bit more success on the Bermuda grass options that he has available to him. So on the basis of that, I think that there's some potential there. The one thing, again, kind of similar answer to Wesley Bryan, I do think that he's mispriced, but as a result of that, you are getting 10% ownership at the moment. So do just be aware how you deploy him. Chalk isn't always bad chalk. It just means how do you build the rest of that lineup around that guy.
There you have it. All right. Audience, locked in. Grayson Sig, and is that Carson Young? I believe it is. Carson Young. Two good value picks here. Both guys that are in my player pool. I like to start to this audience draft, especially Grayson Sig. He was someone I would have been targeting here with my next pick. Spence, we'll go back to you here. Are you interested in Carson Young or Grayson Sig this week?
I think they're both fair options. Carson Young's another one of those names that I feel like I've talked about quite frequently on this show over the last couple of months. We've seen the form start trending in the right direction. He's inside of the top 16 of my model this week for both overall and upside, also inside the top 20 for safety. So he's one of those names at 7,800 that is going to be popular, but I think it's a rightfully so answer. I've talked a lot about the par 4 scoring potential. Top 10 scorer for me in my model on par 4s at this course specifically. So I like what Carson Young has been bringing to the table recently.
All right. Carson Young locked in. I got a tough one I'm deciding between. I guess we'll go to you here, David. We'd love to get your feedback on Sig and Young before I follow with my fourth pick.
Yeah, look, for me, Carson Young, obviously, he'll be coming off that second place at the Worldwide Technology Championship last week. We were on him that week at 66-1. Obviously, finished just one shot short. But in saying that, I don't think that he's necessarily going to feel too perturbed about the fact he came up just short, because he shot 7 under in the last round. I mean, if you shoot 7 under in the last round and the guy who wins it shoots 9 under and you lose by one shot, I mean, it's kind of just one of those situations where you go, okay, like, it just wasn't my day. But he's not going out of there like he threw away that victory. Yes, he's kind of been in the heat of battle, but I think he'll actually take a lot of confidence from that result, rather than a situation where he was, say, threw away the victory or had an easy putt that he could have made to get into a playoff. It wasn't a case like that. He really kind of fought right to the very end and had a great day to put himself in that position in the first place. So he'll be my preference out of the two. Grayson Sig's ownership is pretty astronomical. I know they're being Coley tipped in this week. That's always a great way to see some ownership move towards some golfers, and he does get the wrong, well, the perceived at the moment wrong side of the weather draw as it is currently. So of the two, I would take Carson Young over Grayson Sig if it was me.
All right, there you have it. All right, for my next pick here, I am in a tight race between two guys I am considering, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lock in Henrik Norlander. I think he's going to be a good course fit. I need to get some value here, so he's in the 7K range. He's been above average ball striking. I like what we're getting there. His scrambling around the green game is strong. Not the best putter, but again, is another one of those where he might, if we can neutralize his weak putter in this, easier Bermuda grass, I think he certainly has some upside in this field. Spence, we'd love to get your take on Norlander, and then you're up with your fourth.
Norlander in my model currently is a positive value for both DraftKings price ownership, inside of the top 22 for me in all three iterations of how I ran it. So I do like the pick there, Joel. For me on my selection, there's two routes here that I could see myself going. The first one is jumping up near the top of the board, taking Doug Gim. I've talked about there being a big 5 in my mind this week. The second option, which I can't afford both of these names, would be to take Jacob Bridgman at 8,000. Bridgman's one of those golfers where I just think he's too cheap at the price tag he is, and I would be shocked if he doesn't go off the board if I don't take him. But I think I'm going to go the Doug Gim route here, which ends up giving me 3 golfers in that $9,000 range. Gim's number 1 in my model for projected par 4 scoring. He's also inside of the top 5 for eagle rate. That is going to play at a very high level on those par 5 holes. 4% eagle percentage on 2 of those. So if Gim can put that together, and then, David talked about this at the beginning of the show when we looked out in Vegas. There there was about a 4-shot discrepancy that took place for guys that were on the wrong end of the draw. Doug Ghim was one of those names and ended up only losing by 1 shot to JT Poston. So I think Ghim is trending in the right direction. I was hoping some of the course history that he has provided at this venue would keep this ownership down a little bit more than what it is, but form's too good right now. People are still playing him. I actually think, though, 17% is kind of in that similar answer as a McNeely, Mackenzie Hughes range, to where it's just lower than if Ben Griffin's going to be 25% and Doug Ghim's going to be 17%. And I don't want to look at Vegas being the only answer here of what makes sense, but Doug Ghim is a favorite against pretty much any person that you can look at in a head-to-head matchup. And a lot of those names of the Ben Griffins of the world, a name that I took at the 102, there's something to be said about 8% less when he's a favorite over him.
All right. There you have it. Locked in. David, you got 2 here coming up. Ghim is off the board. Would love to get your take on Norlander and Ghim, and then how are you going to round out your squad?
I think Norlander's a really intriguing name. He piqued my interest as well. So good on you for taking him there. I don't think that I would have personally got to him just to the way that the rest of my draft is kind of shaped out. But I think that he's intriguing along with Vince Whaley there because of the fact that you've got Vince Whaley, you've got Ben Coles, you've got Wesley Bryan, all kind of within that range. Then the guys like Carson Young, Grayson Sigg as well, all eating up ownership. Naturally, that means that you're going to get some leverage just on Henrik Norlander as a result of that. So I think he's a very, very interesting name just there in that kind of mid 7K range. Doug Ghim, again, just the question's going to come down to the putter. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on putting this week, just given the fact that one, it's tended to be a bit of a putting contest, but then also the wind is going to be another factor. Doug Ghim, when he can putt well, does tend to obviously perform brilliantly because of his approach play. It is so epic that it can often outpace his putter anyway. And as Ben said, when he played in Vegas, the fact he finished second was a real marker just behind JT Poston because he was on this incredibly difficult weather wave where essentially he was disadvantaged 4 shots just from the get-go and then ended up coming just short of JT Poston. And so I think that's a promising sign potentially of what he could do in the weather this week.
All right. Who are you looking at with your next 2 picks?
Yes, I'm definitely finalized on one, and that's Andrew Putnam at 9,000. I really wanted to get him onto my betting card this week because he is on the right side of the draw. And if we're thinking of a golfer who's got great around the green skills, who's accurate off the tee, who's got good approach play, who's a good putter, Andrew Putnam just ticks all of those boxes, and he is on that right side of the weather draw. Unfortunately, I couldn't get there in terms of betting markets because he opened at 30s, and at the time that I put out the betting odds, there was another option in Matty Schmid that I rather would go to, who was actually rated longer than Andrew Putnam at the time. Those roles have kind of reversed now. Matty Schmid has come down. Andrew Putnam's drifted back out. So kind of a little regretful because I would have liked to have had him on my betting card. And knowing the way that these things go, that probably means he goes and wins the golf tournament now because he just got left out, and that's what happens. So I'm definitely going there. I'm kind of in 2 minds about where else I'm going to go in terms of this second selection. Looking at your guys' salary, I think we're all in that kind of low 7K range. So I'm probably going to have to go and take one of the golfers down there, and then I've got 2 options that I can round out my picks with. So I'm going to go and take Brandon Wu here. Look, some concerns generally in terms of his recent performances. He was 30th last week in Mexico. We were on him last week at 200-1. So hitting that top 40 bet on him last week was obviously promising. His accuracy was a lot better there as well. He's just got a really good record on coastal golf courses. Played here 3 times. He's always finished in the top 35. He's finished 3rd in Puerto Rico before. He's got a 3rd at the Mexico Open. He's finished 7th at Puerto Rico. He's got a 2nd in the Mexico Open. So that was over 2022, 2023. And then obviously the Mexico Open earlier this year, he finished 13th as well. I do think that he perhaps, has the ability on these coastal courses to really feel at home. And what I'm really wanting here, I don't want to dip into that 6K range because it gets real weak, real quick as soon as you start getting into that 6K range. But Brandon Wu here, all I'm kind of hoping for is a made cut, honestly, and then the rest of these guys is where I'm getting the win equity. And if Brandon Wu finishes like 40th in this field, I'm absolutely fine with that, and having him on my lineup as a result.
All right, Brandon Wu. Andrew Putnam, lock it in, 7,500 to spend. Good start for David. Spence, would love to get your take on Putnam and Wu, and then you're up with your fifth.
Yeah, I think Wu's a very interesting selection from David there. There's a handful of names in that mid to lower $7,000 range that we could have a really good discussion about, because I agree with David. I think when you drop into the 6,000s, there is a substantial drop that takes place. There's one or two names that I do really like, but for the most part, you are going to get that drop off that occurs. When I try to figure out how I want to round out my build right now, I'm just going to name drop a lot of options here and we can move forward with there. So I think a name like Hayden Springer at 3% ownership, 7,500 gives you some of that boomer bust potential. Ryo Hitsatsune, which David has mentioned a couple times, I think that's a very good price for him at 7,500. You also can then drop a little bit lower. I guess for me, the problem with those two specifically, and this might be where I end up being incorrect with this $6,000 take that I'm about to give right now. There is one golfer for me in the $6,000 range that was substantially above everybody else in projected upside. The safety leaves a lot to be desired. He's barely cracking the top 50. And there's a lot of ways where I can push this golfer in the $6,000 range where he ends up being more into that 60th range, which is where you don't necessarily want to be. But 3% ownership, sub 3% ownership for a golfer that is inside the top 25 for me in recent strokes gained total. I think that's something to keep into mind. Recent par 4 scoring. He's actually the number one player in this field. And then the one category that I haven't talked about a lot this week that I do think is going to play a lot of importance here is greens in regulation added to putts per round. That's a category for me where there's going to be an ability to find upside on a lot of these names further down the board. So this is going to be my dart throw option where I am fully aware of what the downside is. We've seen it recently. I'm going to take Roger Sloan at 6,800 and hope that he can put that upside together here at what I deem to be too cheap of a price for some of that upside that he does possess.
Roger Sloan, someone I looked at. Interesting that he actually came off the board. I like the shot you're taking there. You also had me sweating there. I thought you were going to steal my guy. You mentioned his name, so I thought he was gone. But he survived, and so I am pleased to be able to snag right now Hayden Springer, who you mentioned, who, again, he's very much so fits the narrative that I am putting together for this course, which is a golfer who's good around the greens, who's going to be able to scramble, who's, if he gets caught in the wind or what have you, will be able to recover. And we've seen him spike with his putter, right? He gained almost 9 strokes putting at the Sanderson Farm. He has the ability to have those hot days. If he's able to catch a hot putter this week, I think he can also get you another top 10 finish. In the field, a pick like Springer I think is really interesting. It's similar to the sentiment that Spence was just saying. A lot of these guys, the field is going to be closer talent-wise than normal because it's so watered down. So some of these spots where maybe a guy is a little less obvious and you can get a big ownership edge could go a long way. I think the ownership I'm seeing for Springer right now looks pretty low for his potential and upside that he might have this week. So I like Springer here. Audience, you got your last two. So we need those nominations in. We need to get them doubled to round out your squad. You have $8,300 to spend. So you got plenty of money. You don't need to spend it all. If you want, you can leave some money on the table this week. But we do need those last 2 picks in. The fact that there's not even a nomination yet is concerning. Zach, I'll ask you to be the captain, lead the charge, get some nominations in so we can finalize this picks. We'll give the audience a minute. Otherwise, we'll have to start inputting some picks for you. While we wait, David, I'll go back over to you. We'd love to get your take on Sloan and Springer.
I mean, firstly, I thought that when you said that the name got mentioned, that it had to be Rio Hisatsune
Yeah.
because the constant call for Joel is like if you say Rio Hisatsune 3 times, like Joel appears at your doorstep. Like that's just what happens. I mean, you'd open the door and Joel's just standing there, like, "Hey, did someone mention my favorite Japanese golfer?" So I was very, very surprised actually that you said Hayden Springer there. But look, I do actually like Hayden Springer. I think he's got a lot of upside and. In that 7,500 range, one of the more interesting names. Roger Sloan, I think, also in the 6,000 range is one of a very few names that I would consider clicking down there. The other one was David Skins. I would consider. We've seen that real boom or bust potential. Actually, Spence, when you were talking about a player who kind of has this massive upside. I mean, we've seen David Skins, I think, be first round leader twice already this season. He's got that ability to just insanely get incredibly hot with the putter, and then he tends to throw it away and finish like 34th. But I thought that was who you were gonna look at there. So those would be the names kind of in that 6K range that I would potentially look at. Roger Sloan definitely in the mix for sure.
Boom. All right. Audience, great job getting one locked in. Justin Lauer, who has been, a guy that we always kind of tout as a salary saver. He's not this week. He's priced up, but the way he's playing in this field, I think that's a really solid pick. You guys had the money to afford him. I really like the way your squad's coming together. You got one left, 7,400 to spend, so you got to make sure you can afford it. And we're going to need that last pick locked in. While we wait for that last pick to get locked, Spence, we'll go to you. We'd love to get your take here on Justin Lauer.
I'm probably lower on Lauer than consensus. Part of my problem is you get this $9,300 price tag, kind of that you just alluded to, Joel, where it's one thing to get pushed up the board. It's another thing to get pushed up the board and then also be one of the more popular players down in this range there. So if you're looking for actual leverage options, and it's a very minor take, like he's still a top 15 golfer for me. This isn't one of those substantial takeaways where all of a sudden Lauer is, I think, a terrible pick. But if I'm directly comparing, I would rather have Sam Stevens. I would rather play Matty Schmid. I would rather move up to Doug Gim. That's kind of just the problems where Lauer, if he's going to be 20% owned, is just not going to make my player pool quite as frequently.
That makes sense. Totally makes sense. You got to find your leverage spots, especially in these fields. Because the other thing you have to realize, because it's such a watered down field, even though there's more guys in the tournament, there's less golfers that are actually going to be rostered, right? There's going to be a higher concentrated percent of ownership to a few golfers. So finding ways to be different will be pretty important. All right, audience, great job locking in that final pick. Something you'll know, which, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place here with your last pick. Some of these other 7K options are gone. For what you had left to pick from, I think it's an intriguing option. I think he does offer some upside. I really like the way this audience roster has come together. David, we'd love to go from you. I saw you shaking your head when I said he has some upside. So is Sung Yul No on your radar for this week?
No, I think Sun Yun is a really interesting pick. I mean, he kind of fits the profile, right? He's a really good putter of the golf ball. He's good around the greens. That's what we're looking for, really, at this golf course. And he's got a good record sneakily at this golf course, really. I mean, he's played it 3 times. He's made 3 cuts. And, the 7K range, that's kind of a good thing. If this guy can make the weekend, is really going to be key. So tends to find the cut when he plays the tropical courses. Doesn't have any massively high-end finishes, but he's coming off a decent enough year on the Corn Ferry Tour, obviously 18th at the Corn Ferry Tour Championship as well, and obviously a past PGA Tour player as well, as we know, with the infamous first round pick that Spence made that would be forever immortalized in PGA Draft Cast history. Justin Lauer is like the chalk fade for me. I mean, one, who wants to play Justin Lauer at 9,300, and the fact that we've got 20% ownership, and the fact he's on the wrong side of the weather draw, as we currently see it, that, like, for me, is like the easiest 20% of ownership that I can fade straight away. So then the audience got it right with the second pick. I think they got it wrong with the first pick. Boom.
All right. To be determined. Interesting. I'm going to make a pretty gross pick here with my last one. I got to go to the 6K range. This is a guy I did not see myself drafting ever this year, but here we are. I had to make the pick. He does seem to be trending at least in the right direction, and that's going to be Brandt Snedeker. Brandt Snedeker is not a guy I've rostered in quite some time. but I had to get down to the 6K range. If you look at deeper dive into the numbers, he played in the Pro Tour in the Sanderson Farms. He got 26th and 16th, two pretty good results. That came with nuclear putting, but he's a great putter. That's his game, and he could go nuclear putting here. That's what he does. He also gains strokes on approach, which, he is typically not a great approach player, but his last two outings, he gained over 2 strokes approach. If he's found something there, he's going to be above average on approach with his pretty hot putter. I think this driver will be neutralized because of the course. I actually think he has some upside in a watered down field. So Brandt Snedeker, not a guy I'll probably be drafting again, but for this week, I think he could get there at 6,700. Spence, would love your take on Snedeker and then how you rounded out your squad.
Look, Joel, I don't hate the selection. He's 62nd for me overall. I think you know what you're kind of signing up for. If you look at some of the more safety markets, though, inside of my sheet, and that's going to be driven by the 16th at the Sanderson and the 26th at the Procore, he jumps to 30th. I kind of agree with the David sentiment. There's 3 names for me. It's Skins, it's Sloan, and I kind of sort of liked S.H. Kim. I thought he possessed a little bit of upside if you were trying to go that boom or bust route. Those are really the only 3 that I'm trying to fit into my player pool, but I don't have a massive take against Snedeker if there's belief that he's turning it back around again. When I round out my lineup here, and I'm going to ask you guys a question. We'll play a little trivia here for 1 second. So there's obviously very little data to pull from here. You don't have Stat Tracker present, but I always look for expected dispersion of scoring for a specific course. So that just means if you take off the tee approach around the green putting and you take the recent stats from the last 24 rounds, you throw it into a model. Who do you think the number 1 expected player is in this tournament? And just to make this simpler right now, it is a name that's already been taken.
It's going to be somebody gross. This whole field's gross.
It's not. I will give another hint.
Okay.
It's somebody that's the name that's gross is the name I'm about to take, who's the second person. But
were they taken in the first round?
They were not.
Okay, Seamus Fowl.
Seamus is not the pick. Seamus was, I believe, 3rd.
Okay.
Doug Gim?
Gim is a little bit lower. It's actually Matty Schmid from David's pick there. So a lot
Excellent.
to like about Schmid. I'm going to take the guy who's 2nd in my sheet. And it really popped up to me just because I wasn't expecting this. There's a lot of names in this lower $7,000 section. And I really wish, David, that I could get to Rio. I assume that's who you've left your money for. Obviously, I can't afford him right now. I would love to get up to him. I would have loved if Springer could have been a choice for me. Couldn't have afforded him either. Really, my options either came down to Lanto Griffin, who's another steady climber in that category for me. There's Pearson Cootie, who's a boomer bust target. And then there's the second name in my sheet who happened to be Chad Ramey. So I'm going to rely on what my model says there. I don't really ever play Chad Ramey, but I just found it surprising that he was 2nd in that category, also graded inside of the top 20 for me and expected weighted strokes gain total over the entire year. So this just might be a very nice course fit for him, for a golfer that has been trending in a better direction recently.
I like Chad Ramey. I see what you're doing there with Jerry 7200. There was a time earlier in the year where he was playing well. We were targeting him. So in this field, in this type of tournament, I think Chad Ramey makes sense. So I like that pick. David, would love your take. And then the last pick of the draft.
Yeah, I actually think Chad Ramey's a solid selection. I think that might have actually been Spencer's first selection from what I think is the right side of the weather draw. So we might be polar opposite in terms of where the weather wave is going, which would be really interesting if it completely flips, which, it can do, as I said. Make sure you're in the Win Daily Discord because we're giving you updates right up until lock in terms of the weather. But look, Ramey's a winner at Punta Cana. He's won a tropical course before. He came here, first time he played it, finished 17th. So anytime a player comes out on debut, plays well at a golf course, generally for me is a good sign. It suggests that it maybe fits their eye. He's good around the greens. He's a good putter as well. And one of those kind of like seasoned pro. He's been on the PGA Tour for fair number of years now and always managed to scrape through. He's 113th at the moment in FedEx Cup rankings. So I can see him coming and getting across the line. And I think it's a decent enough fit with for him. So I think he's a solid selection. I actually kind of like Brandon Snedeker as well, and similar kind of reason like Ramey. Like, I mean, as a seasoned veteran who knows how to play on the PGA Tour and knows how to retain his card, and comes in, he's been finding better approach by lightning. His putt has been warming up. You know, he's 43 years old. Like, if he doesn't retain his PGA Tour card, I mean, he's not going to be coming back most likely. Like, let's face reality there. So, you know, a player like that who's like kind of at the last chance saloon here and at the RSM Classic, he's 184th at the moment on the PGA Tour rankings, but he's compiled a run of 12, 26, 16th in his last 3 starts. And the fact that he's had that recent spurt in form suggests to me he's still hungry. And the fact that he has had all those years of experience and what it takes to compete on the PGA Tour, you know, it wouldn't be foreign to see a 43-year-old in this kind of weak field make the cut and see himself in, you know, the top 30, top 20 by the end of the week. So I think he's actually an interesting name if you do find yourself in that lowly 6,700 range. I'm actually not going to take Rio Hasatsune, even though Spencer's input him. I was in between the 2 players. And the reason why I had 2 players here was that I wasn't sure if Joel would take Hasatsune or if this other player that I'm going to take would go. But at least I knew that I had a contingency if one of them went. Whereas, like, in terms of the 7K range, I wanted Brandon Wu. And that was like, if I didn't hit Brandon Wu, I was probably going to be taking Lanto Griffin. And I didn't really want to do that. So that's the way I did it in that order. So my backup was Rio Hasatsune, so you're correct there, Spence. But the player that I'm actually going to take here is Nate Lashley, who is a perennial expert on these type of courses where you are exposed to the wind, that you're on these tropical conditions. He's got a long history of playing very, very well on these type of golf courses. He's played here once. He finished 35th, and that included opening with a 64 and closing with a 66. So he has played very, very well here previously. He's got a 3rd at Puerto Rico. He's had a 4th at Punta Cana. He's had an 8th at Puerto Rico. So he's had a number of results basically on these type of courses where he's managed to perform very well. He's on a run of made cuts at the moment. He's on 5 consecutive made cuts, including a 16th at the Zozo Championship. Miles stronger in terms of field than what we see here this week. And last week's 55th, look, it was really came down to one round. He shot a 75 in the 3rd round. Other than that, he was pretty good, and like obviously made the cut and was playing decently other than what he did on Saturday. So I'm happy to take him here. Again, 109th on the FedEx Cup ranking list. Needs a good finish here just to really lock up that PGA Tour card and make sure that he is here in 2025 again.
All right, there you have it. That's a wrap for the draft this week. Butterfield Bermuda Championship should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to check it out. Let us know whose lineup you think is going to take it down. We'll be crowning the champion next week and doing it all over again. Don't forget to give us a follow and hit the like button. We're not done giving information this week either. If you sign up for Win Daily, you get into Discord. You will get the weather updates as we get closer to Thursday's tee-off times. You'll get our outright picks, any potential bets that we'll be making, Steven's ownership articles. You really understand what ownership and who to target for this tournament. Before we get you out of here tonight, though, we do have some first-round leaders. David, we'll start with you. Who are you targeting in the first-round leader market?
Yeah, so I think it's the kind of first-round leader market where it's going to be boom or bust, right? Like as it always is when it comes to first-round leaders. But especially in a field like this, it feels like you can maybe take a few chances. So I've got 2 at the top of the board. I've got 2 further down the board, and kind of try to avoid that middle range in terms of the odd markets. So I'm going to take the 2 at the top. Then I'm going to take a McNeely and Hughes, who I mentioned at the very top of the show would have been in my selection of the first. You're getting 30s on them at the moment for first-round leaders. And the reason why I like that is it's nearly double what you're offering, the books are offering in terms of their win odds for the entire tournament. And then when you get into those like 40s, 50s kind of ranges, you're not getting that much of an increase. It's basically parallel between the win odds and the first-round leader odds on those golfers. So happy to take them both at 30s there. In terms of wily veterans fighting for their PGA Tour careers, Kevin Streelman, I would also put up as first round leader, arrives off a run of third at the Black Desert Championship Utah and a 24th last week in Mexico. He was actually first round leader last week as well, so he's got that going for him. He's had a number of decent finishes when it comes to first rounds lately, so that's included a first, a couple of fourths, and a sixth in the first round. So his first round lead scoring has been pretty good. In that vein, I mean, Mackenzie Hughes, as I mentioned, he's had a second, a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth in the first round in 4 of his recent starts too. So I like Kevin Streelman there, just as a flyer at 75 to 1. And the final one would be my final selection on the Draftcast, which was Nate Lashley at 66 to 1. Kind of said everything I need to do about him, but again, I think that's a reasonable odd given what he's priced in the win market versus what he's priced in the first round leader market there. Again, was 4th last week after the first round, so did have a hot start. He's had 12th recently and a second in the first round too. So recent form in the first rounds for Nate Lashley, and on a type of golf course that I think that he really enjoys.
All right, there you have it. Nate Lashley, it is. Spence, how about you? Who are you looking in first round leader market?
Like, this answer might end up, well, it probably is more of a DFS answer than outright betting or first round leaders, because I do agree with David that trending right now, the PM AM split would be probably every so slightly marginally better. As David alluded to, that can always change. The one thing I do want to say for DFS purposes, and we will find more out in the next 24 plus hours, like we will get more, hopefully, of a concrete answer here. It was such a stark contrast in Vegas of what happened that there is a potential that if this is not as widespread of a, for sure, as David called it, home run answer, this could go over the top in ownership to where all of a sudden the PM wave ends up getting too much of an ownership compared to the AM wave. This lineup, we're drafting it on a Tuesday. We could find out on Wednesday night that my build specifically ends up being last place, and we kind of know that to be the case. But for GPP contests, I'm always trying to think outside of the box there and just try to zig where people zag. And that's kind of where I landed on the first round leader names. I still kept it in the morning for this second. You know, this could always change over the next 24 hours, but I took Andrew Novak at 40 to 1. I talked about the high upside numbers that he had in my sheet. Sam Stevens, 40 to 1. Ben Griffin, 35 to 1. I took Jacob Bridgman at 50 to 1. I was very surprised that Bridgman was not drafted with all the popularity that he has in the market at what I deem to be a pretty good price tag there. And then I took KH Lee at 70 to 1 and bet on those upside totals.
Boom. I agree with the sentiment in the tournament like this. Like, if there's a time to really swing for the fences, it's this one, right? This is where, you know, the talent is more even than most tournaments because it's a little bit watered down. So if you want to take a 100 to 1 plus shot, this would be the week to do it. I have a few real Hail Marys I'm going to put out there for you. Now, these are really Hail Marys, so tread lightly. But the first one I'm going to start with is Kevin Kisner at 170 to 1. Now, Kevin Kisner has been lost recently. We haven't heard him. But again, he's Kevin Kisner. I mean, it wasn't all that long ago. We were talking about him competing in some of these bigger fields. In this field, to just have one good round at 170 to 1, that's a huge number. I also want to throw out another 120 to 1 in Troy Merritt, who has just shown to show up in first rounds. He's got a few really low scores in the first round. Again, Troy Merritt, when he's playing well, we mentioned him in some of these bigger field tournaments. So in a watered down field, he can certainly pop for a round. And the last one, I believe this is one of David's guys, another long shot at 150 to 1. And that's Paul Barjon, who, you know, again, another one of those guys who's been done well in first rounds at 150 to 1. That's just a really big number for a guy to have one low round. And then I have two more regular shots that I like that we can go after, both at 40 to 1. Daniel Berger, who you always know I like a lot. I think this is another really good spot for him. And Lucas Glover, who has played well here, won first round. I think he could show up and make a few putts and have a really strong showing this week. That's a wrap for the first round leaders. Like I said, give us a follow. Let us know who you think is going to win. We're coming back next week and crowning a champion. It's going to be a fun week to watch some golf in Bermuda. If you get to check it out, be sure to do so. Good luck this week. And did I forget anything?
I want to put on the record that I have no association and want to have no association with Paul Barjon. But you can also get Paul Barjon at 225 to 1 for first round leader at Bet365
wow.
if you have access to Bet365 and want to tail Joel's picks there. So just put that out there. That one, I do not and have not and will not associate with Paul Barjon. But also he is 225 to 1 on Bet365. But pleasure to see you guys again. And thanks. Let's have a good week.
All right. Good luck.